Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I have a lot to get with you on this show. If you missed our first episode of the week that dropped on Tuesday, we had a ton of evaluations coming out of Penn State's camps. On Friday, they had their Big Man Challenge, first 7-on-7 tournament. On Sunday, they had an elite showcase camp. We saw about a dozen commits on the field between those two events. Tyler Calvaruso, a resident recruiting insider, and I went through a bunch of them, gave you kind of fresh perspective on what Penn State is getting in that 2026 class. And additionally, it was a very, very big official visit weekend here in Happy Valley. We went through a bunch of those names to know, talked about some of the feedback we're hearing as players left Happy Valley. A little bit later on this show, we'll turn our attention to the next official visit weekend because they have targets coming to town yet again. Penn State looking to push to 20 commitments and beyond in the 2026 cycle with a top 5 class nationally. But first things first on this show, we're going to focus on quarterbacks. Penn State's present quarterbacks, their future quarterbacks. And Brad Maendler is a name that I think Nittany Lions fans have certainly come to know by now. Personal quarterback trainer based in Ohio, worked with former Ohio high school standout Drew Allar, did the same with even Grunkemeyer, who is now looking like QB2 on this squad. And then a couple prospects who are in Penn State's 2026 class have put in work with Maendler. You've got Troy Huhn, who's come all the way out from San Diego, spent some time with him, and then Peyton Falzone, as we've documented through some stories at Lions247.com, trying to take his game to the next level as a passer. So we're going to pick Brad's brain right now by welcoming him back to the Lions 24/7 podcast. Thank you so much, Brad. I think last time we had you on the show, Drew was getting ready for maybe his second season as the starting quarterback, and I think Ethan Grunkemeyer hadn't gotten to campus yet. So we got a lot to catch up on.
Sure do. Great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. Obviously, I think your name has been hammered home for a lot of Penn State fans over recent recruiting cycles with the quarterbacks that we've gotten to know along the way. And the catalyst for that, obviously, was our number one ranked quarterback recruit in the 2022 class at 24/7 Sports. That is Drew Allar, who's suddenly a senior and a third-year starting quarterback for Penn State. He's got a lot of program career records within his reach, and certainly he is viewed as a face of Penn State's opportunity to go for a championship push. It's first in almost 40 years. So, Brad, when you look back at the scrawny high school kid that you started working with midway through his high school career to where he is now, a young man, last year of college, he has big goals beyond college. What are some of the most startling developmental advances that you have noticed?
Yeah, so I don't know that I would ever characterize him as scrawny, but 6'5", probably about 195 at that point. That was between his sophomore and junior year. So I can still remember when he walked into the training facility, he had to duck underneath the door. And so, he always had that size. But I think, if you look at his development, it's really with his body, his movement. When I first met him, he was trying to get control over this big body and trying to be fluid and athletic and all of those things. And the first big jump that I saw there was probably 6 months into our training, because he had started working with a local Cleveland-based trainer on his movement and strength and those kinds of things. And so once I saw the arm coming together and then the body coming together as well, that was when I got really excited. I was like, okay, this is really headed in a good direction. So I would say just that process has been the biggest thing to me. And I look at what I saw during spring football. They do a drill with a Bosu ball, right, where the backs have to kind of tiptoe along the sidelines and keep their feet while they have people kind of diving at their feet and trying to tackle them. Well, they use a Bosu ball to sort of simulate that. And part of that process is reaching down to kind of stiff arm the Bosu ball while you're keeping your feet. And I've never seen Drew look that nimble. He looked nimble, quick, light feet, more so than I've ever seen him. And I even was talking to him after that practice, just really kind of like, I was like, wow, I've not seen you look like that. So I think that's probably the biggest story.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard from Penn State strength coach Chuck Losey every offseason here and saying mobility for Drew, his ability to be more of a threat on the ground. We saw that show up in a big way, not just with some of the rushing ability last year, but evading pressure, buying time for his teammates downfield, and then finding them. When you look at rolling it forward toward his final season at Penn State, what does that elevated ability do for him and for Andy Kotelnicki as offensive coordinator?
Yeah. Well, I think his biggest on-field area of improvement is just his ability to extend plays, right? So part of that's just comfort level, really understanding the playbook, that ability to move and slide in the pocket and keep your cool. And so just improved mobility means that should get even better, right? And I think that's such a secret weapon of his. Everybody kind of talks about the arm and those kinds of things, and that's certainly true. But his ability to extend plays is, I think, going to be one of the best in the country this coming year. And we'll see. But I'm pretty bullish on what that could look like this year.
I know at QB Accelerate, you have worked on so much with Drew, and that includes above the shoulders, what's going on in his head. What is he bringing to the huddle this year? A guy who's played so much college ball, someone who certainly understands the expectations that are on this team and on him personally. What do you picked up about his mindset thus far in 2025?
Yeah, he's played a lot of football and had a lot of experiences, right? And so you said it at the opening, it's like he's finally a senior. And those experiences for him translate into better decision-making, bigger plays through extending plays like we had talked about. And I think, when you have had that many experiences and had the emotional ups and downs, quarterbacking is so important, just like defensive backs, right? Having a short memory. So if I make a bad play, I cannot let that play linger because I got to get on to the next play. And I think that's probably the biggest area that I see when you've got experienced quarterbacks who are as committed mentally as he is with his preparation, right? They know the playbook inside and out. They've seen all the defenses. So if they have a bad play, they know, okay, I've got 11 guys in this huddle, including myself. I cannot show that I'm unhappy with that. We just got to throw that play away and get on to the next. And I see it when I go to Penn State. I was there all sort of spring and winter with workouts, and I always like to sit in on meetings and just, his command of the room, the relationships he has with his teammates. I think that's just the biggest thing is his ability to command that locker room, command that huddle, distribute the football, make those plays when it's time to extend them, and just the things that you would expect out of a senior quarterback who's, again, had a lot of experiences and is playing at the top of his game.
Beyond QB1, there's a really intriguing position battle for that second quarterback job, and that looms large for beyond 2025 when Penn State's going to need a new QB1. Ethan Grunkemeyer, Jackson Smolik are the two main competitors there. We've discussed them with position coach Danny O'Brien as recently as last week. I'm curious where you feel Ethan Grunkemeyer, now in year 2 with the program, is in his development process and his ability to go out there and, if needed, lead a Penn State offense in Big Ten action.
Yeah. I've had conversations with Danny O'Brien about this, and Danny has remarked several times just the impact that Drew has had, not only in the whole room, but Ethan. And Ethan's advancement in terms of his preparation. Ethan's a very smart kid. He's book smart and football smart. But preparation is a different thing. You have to learn how to watch film. You have to learn the whole prep process and how do you get the biggest bang for your buck. And so, like, Ethan's grasp of the playbook and his ability to make decisions, the preparation piece that makes that possible, he is well ahead of where he should be in those areas. So I know just in seeing him, he looks very calm. He looks very poised. And I expect him, when he gets his opportunities this fall, to show really well because, as good as his arm is, and it's fantastic, it's still about making great decisions and distributing the football and getting first downs. And so you have to have the mental side of that. And he's made fantastic strides in that area.
Ethan Grunkemeyer, another player out of Ohio who trained at QB Accelerate with Brad. And when you look back at his decision to come to Penn State in the first place, knowingly following a guy he knew pretty well in Drew Allar, knowing that Drew wasn't really going to be removed from that starting position unless something drastic happened, How has he been able to be patient through the process? Because we're in the era of the transfer portal. Quarterbacks specifically always seemingly like to have an eye on different campuses, different opportunities. We see it every single time that portal opens up. We've heard no whispers about that with Ethan Grunkemeyer. He's been steadfast in his commitment about staying the course with Penn State. So from your standpoint, where does that come from? What kind of mental makeup has he brought to the position? Has he brought to State College?
Yeah, I think he's been very patient. He's, at Penn State, it's all about the team, right? And Ethan settled right into the room in that sense. I think he understood right away what it was going to require to be, not only get on the field, but be a top performer. And it's a process. And you work through and you pay your dues and you do the things that you have to do. And so I think he's been great. He's very yeoman-like, right? Every day he shows up. Talked to Danny about this. Like, he's always prepared. When he's getting called on, answers are always spot on. You know what I mean? Like, this is a guy who just understands it's a process, and his time is coming.
We'll take a look at some of these other quarterbacks beyond Drew as we get out of conference play early in the season. Some lopsided matchups. There should be opportunities for other guys to get involved, and a big August ahead for both Smolik and Grunkemeyer, and a big June and July too, as they try to set the stage for themselves.
Yes.
Brad, looking a little bit further down the road, you've got two guys you're working with within this 2026 Penn State class, which has really been an impressive group so far to put together. We'll start with the one we recently got eyes on just on Sunday at Penn State inside Haluba Hall. That's Peyton Fzone, in-state quarterback. He's only the second in-state quarterback projected to sign with Penn State on scholarship in the last 15 years. So this is a pretty rare occurrence here in Happy Valley. Yeah. He's also someone who wowed last year with the game film and his ability as a dual threat and the strong arm. But he has taken it upon himself to really try to polish his passing pedigree. He's making a lot of long trips out to you in Ohio, traveling west. He's told us a little bit about those and what they've kind of demanded of him, sacrificing some weekends. So first off, what do you make of the hustle that Peyton Fzone has put into this offseason trying to improve himself? And number two, from your vantage point, how has he improved so far in 2025?
I love that you use the word hustle because that's really what this is. And it's Falzone hustle. It's the whole family because they've come out at least 10 times since January 1st. And that's a whole weekend. So we're spending a little bit of Friday, a little bit of Saturday, sometimes even a little bit of Sunday. And then they head back home, and sometimes they've flown and sometimes they've driven. But total commitment to do what is required to help him realize his potential. And his potential athletically is off the charts. In the 18 years that I've been doing this, he's the most physically gifted quarterback that I've ever had. His just natural raw arm strength is better than anybody I've had. His, run jump, those numbers better than anyone that I've had. And then you combine that with a commitment and a kind of a healthy obsession for improvement. It won't surprise me if he ends up being a great player at Penn State. I'm obviously pretty bullish on him, but when you think about what it takes to be a Penn State quarterback, he's willing to put in the time to move from raw potential to actual production and being able to do what they need him to do, because playing quarterback is about a lot more than how you throw and how you run. This is a complex position. So, but I'm excited to see what he does because I think his potential is significant.
Something I've been curious about, and I think you would be a great resource for the answer, perhaps, and watching Peyton twice in camp action during the last month is I know he's trying to implement a lot of new stuff from a fundamental standpoint. So how much effort and maybe how much time is required to go from when you're actually thinking through that process to when you're just naturally seamlessly going through the motions? I know when pitchers try to change their mechanics, it can throw them off their game for a bit. How well is Peyton maybe going to be prepared to get into September and feel like everything's more fluid versus I got to think about this at the same time I'm trying to do it?
Yeah. It depends on, Drew made a very rapid ascension. It was about a 6-month process. For others, can be more like 6 to 12 months where it's consistent and it happens without thought, right? And what we're seeing is Peyton has reduced a lot of extras in his throwing motion, right? So that was a big goal, was to kind of take things, clear them off a little bit, and make it just more efficient, more fluid. I wanted him to feel smooth up top. I wanted him to really connect to his hips and the ground and how he generates power. He was very much one of these guys who obviously has a very, very strong arm, but all his velocity was driven through his arm. And so we had to kind of like flip that. And it took him a little bit to get that feeling of how to use the right power slings to generate power. He loves the way that it feels. It just takes a little bit of time for that to, especially in a competitive environment where you're throwing routes or you're moving around and those kinds of things. So he is definitely on track. And I think the Peyton Fzone that you see by the time he gets to Penn State next spring will look very, very good.
Should be exciting to follow. And I know he's got a teammate in this class, a future teammate at least, in Troy Huhn. They shared the field. I know you were watching both of them at the Elite 11 regional camp in State College. And Troy Huhn, kind of on a different end of the pendulum, not that wow you because of his athleticism type stuff, but seems to be quite comfortable when it comes to a lot of the passing mechanics and standing tall in the pocket that is going to be required at the next level. When you worked with Troy, and I know it hasn't been as frequent, he lives out in Southern California, but when you have worked with Troy, does he seem like a young man who's a little bit ahead of the curve among peers for where he is as a passer?
Absolutely. Troy is very impressive. He trains with a buddy of mine out in Southern California, Danny Hernandez, and Danny does a great job of getting kids not only prepared, but effective, either in, clean pocket scenarios or in movement scenarios. So he's had a lot of good training. When I met him, the thing that really struck me was the intensity around wanting to improve. So he and Peyton and Drew and Grunk, very similar wiring in terms of this motivation to get better. It's always a focus on getting better. And Troy, for a kid who's honestly not played a lot of quarterback, like he didn't start playing quarterback until his freshman year, I believe. It might have been 8th grade, but it was I'm pretty sure it was his freshman year. He's well ahead of where he should be, in that context. And so extremely polished, lots of arm talent, moves extremely well. Like he's a lot more athletic than you would think. So I think, they've got 226 quarterbacks who are just, got so much potential and upside. And I'm really excited to see what happens with these two.
I want to finish with this, Brad, because these are two guys that they've shared a field together now. I think that was their first time meeting a few weekends back in State College. They'll grow on that relationship. But we're in an era where I've spoken with quarterbacks and they say, I want to be the only guy in my class. That's important to me. I want to make that clear to the coaching staff. I mean, these two are already in competition mode, I'd imagine, with each other, a friendly competition, because they both want to be the starting quarterback for Penn State someday. And so you've had a chance to pick their brains in different dynamics. Why do you think these two can mesh? Why can they be two puzzle pieces when you got a lot of quarterbacks trying to resist this exact scenario?
Yeah, I think all you have to do is meet the families, and it really tells the story. They're two great kids. Uber competitive, yes, and both are going to come in and they're going to fight and scratch for that job. There is no doubt about that. But like the people they are is a direct result of the families that they come from. So, to see them get along and have fun, but also compete the same way that Grunk competes with Drew and Jackson Smollett competes with those guys. Jackson Smollett is very talented. I don't know that Penn State's ever had a more talented quarterback room. I'd love to see somebody do a little bit of Maybe you can do that, Tyler. Maybe that's something you can do. But
maybe I can ask Trace McSorley, see if he can come up with one for us.
Oh my gosh!
I think you
definitely ask Trace. Yeah,
yeah. I think you make a great point, though, and I think a lot of people are talking about a lot of positions in that regard right now at Penn State. How the depth is in place, how guys are buying in, and that's where you've got teams saying, well, or you've got experts saying this might be the best team in the country right now, and so they got to go out and prove it. But you obviously have a great feel, your fingers on the pulse of what's happening for Penn State at the quarterback spot. So in the years ahead, we hope to pick your brain again, and I hope you enjoy following these four and in their journeys, because they're just getting started, all four of them. So thank you for the time, and hope you continue the great work with QB Accelerate over in Ohio.
Hey, I really appreciate it, Tyler.
Thank you.
Take care.
This episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast continues with attention on another pivotal weekend ahead for Penn State Nittany Lions recruiting. They continue to piece together this 2026 recruiting class, highly ranked, feeling in a hurry, and they have a chance to impress more uncommitted targets who are on campus this weekend. We're going to break down a few of those names to know with Tyler Calvaruso, a resident recruiting insider, right now on the Lions 24/7 podcast. Tyler, good to get you back on board. I hope people listened to episode number 1 this week, which was essentially 50 minutes of pure recruiting updates, from the official visit feedback to a bunch of evaluations from camp looks at a bunch of Penn State commits. So I hope people are coming off of that and they're well educated on where we stand from a recruiting standpoint. And if they didn't, circle back, check that out, and maybe come back and check with us about what's coming up this weekend. Tyler, you've done fantastic work at Lions247.com. Glad to get you back on for another conversation.
Glad to be back. That was a fun conversation earlier in the week, and I'm anticipating we're going to have another one here today.
That's right. Well, you've got a story up on Thursday morning, so this podcast goes live on Friday. Hopefully plenty of people have checked out your story, but you had 5 official visitors in the crosshairs in terms of needing to know about them and maybe a little bit extra buzz around them going into the weekend. So wherever you want to start is great, but I was going to kind of nudge you in the direction of a position we haven't talked about much when it's not Messiah Minkins, and that's running back, because it's been Messiah Minkins committed to this class since 2023, before his sophomore year. He's a guy you and I discussed a lot in episode 1 this week. We've got highlights up from his camp performance on Sunday over at Lions247.com. We'll get a chance to see him again Friday during 7-on-7 action with his Harrisburg teammates. But we know Stan Drayton has been exploring options, and there's been one name that has been pretty consistently brought up, and he's coming to campus this weekend.
Yeah, this is actually exactly where I was going to start. I figured I wrote the article in positional order, so I might as well rattle them off in positional order. We're going to start in the backfield. Brian Bonner, number 6 running back in the nation, firmly ranked inside of the top 24/7. He's going to be on campus for his official visit this weekend. Stan Drayton's kind of 1 for 1 as a recruiter at Penn State, if you really think about it. He's had 2 top priorities since arriving in State College: keep Messiah Minkins on board and go at a second running back in the 26 class. And Brian Bonner has been his top target in doing so. I've done a lot of checking in on Bonner this week, because it's always interesting when you get a California kid out to campus making that cross-country trip. Where do things stand in his recruitment? I've heard a lot of different things. Now, there was a point where I thought Washington was the leader. I had thought that really going into the week as well, but it sounds like things have tapered off there a little bit. So that was the first thing that I found a little bit eye-opening. I heard Nebraska made a pretty big move on Bonner during his official visit last week, so it looks like the Huskers are a real contender there. And then another source familiar with the recruitment indicated, hey, look, UCLA was Bonner's leader going into this June official visit slate. Bruins got him on campus for an OV mid-May, made a really strong impression. And hey, look, UCLA's been recruiting really, really well. If you go look at some of their recent gets and where they stand in the rankings, they've got a top 15 class out there in Westwood. So it wouldn't stun me if that's where Bonner landed. In the end, it's the closest option to home. He's got a good relationship with that staff, but he's got a good relationship with Drayton as well. Again, being a clear priority for Drayton. He was one of Drayton's first stops during the spring contact period after Penn State sent its coaches out on the road at the conclusion of spring ball. Penn State did a really good job with Bonner while he was on campus during spring ball. So now I think this official is a really pivotal point in Penn State's pursuit. I've been led to believe that Penn State has a real chance to stand out as Bonner's leader coming out of the weekend if all goes well. Again, the relationship with Drayton's a sticking point. He sees an opportunity in Penn State's offense and Penn State's backfield, teaming up with Messiah Minkins. One thing you got to keep in mind with a lot of the elite running back recruits these days is they don't mind a second back in that class with them. Messiah Minkins, we know that from a competitor standpoint, he doesn't really care who else is with him in the running back room, because he's going to get in there and compete for his reps. That's just how he's wired. But there's a lot to be said about getting less mileage on backs these days when it comes to their aspirations of getting with the next level. You've seen it at Penn State with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen in the backfield. A lot of kids, they don't mind being part of a two-headed monster, and Bonner falls into that category.
It's been very rare to see Penn State bring in a one-man running back class.
Yes.
I think Journey Brown was a one-man running back class, if I remember, back in the 2017 cycle. There was one year where they didn't take a high school running back, and they ended up bringing in John Lovett out of Baylor as a transfer. But it's pretty much been tandem signings, whether it was Devin Ford and Noah Kane, or Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, or maybe guys that haven't panned out down the road, but they've bought into the competition. They know they're not going to be alone in that class, certainly when they get to that room. And let me ask you this. Bonner's a guy who, you mentioned some of the accolades. He's right on the doorstep of being a top 100 overall guy. He is a top 10 running back, coming off a season in which he had 1,400 plus rushing yards. I think he had almost 50 catches on the season too, showed a lot of versatility, just about 30 touchdowns on his junior year. If he were to go in a different direction and this swing for Penn State to make him the second running back doesn't come to fruition, is it kind of back to the drawing board for RB2, or is it maybe just incredibly murky because Stan Drayton came on halfway through this cycle and there haven't been a lot of tangible evidence that a certain player or two are on that target board right now?
It's a little bit of both. I think, out of respect for those in the know, there are some guys who've been kept on the back burner, guys they've been monitoring. I think those are probably names we could get into a little bit more if Bonner decides to go elsewhere. But there's also a little bit of going back to the drawing board as well, because, again, Drayton was a late arrival. That gives him less time from an evaluational standpoint. So there are guys he's been, looking to see more of, whether it be testing numbers or film. And that's just all part of the process at this point. So the hope, obviously, is to wrap things up by landing Bonner, and bang, you have your two running backs in the class right there. But if it goes beyond that, they've got some guys they've been monitoring on the low, and they're definitely going to have some guys stored away to watch some more film on. That's always a very interesting part of the cycle. It takes me back to, I think the last time we had a late running back ad was Cam Wallace in the 23 class. That was a December signing. We haven't seen anything like that at running back recently. If Bonner goes elsewhere, maybe we have a similar scenario pop up again where a guy really rises up the board, pops onto the radar late in the game.
I remember that cycle. It was London Montgomery was on board ahead of him. Is that correct? Yeah, they had London Montgomery committed. Of course, he lost his senior season because of a knee injury. They knew that was happening. And they basically went into that season with some names on the board with an open mind. And Cam Wallace was somebody who, threw some of that early senior season film and what he was doing in all sorts of methods on the field at different positions, won them over, and the rest is history. Ultimately, he gets to campus. He'll be a third-year running back this year. He's trying to reclaim that RB3 job after an injury last year. Shifting over to another position where Penn State has tended to bring in multiple players in their freshman classes. And in fact, they're coming off a class in 2025 in which they have 3 freshmen now on campus at tight end. And this is one that Penn State can afford to be highly selective. They have arguably the most impressive room in terms of blue chip talent right now across college football at tight end. And that's without an All-American Tyler Warren now. So looking ahead to the 2026 class, this is kind of an unresolved situation at tight end. And there's a potential name to fill that spot here coming to campus.
Yeah, Braden Fogel is a top 24/7 prospect out of Ohio. Penn State was late to the game here. They didn't offer until May. Has not stopped Ty Howe from really establishing the Nittany Lions as a top contender here. Locked in that OV pretty quickly for this upcoming weekend. And the fact of the matter is, Penn State has a lot to sell at tight end. I think everyone knows that. The recent production at the position, the recent success at the position kind of speaks for itself on Howe's behalf. Now, the path to early playing time might not be there. And that's a big reason why top 100 target Max Suter decided to scrap his official visit last weekend, take things in a different direction. But look, if you're looking beyond the potential for early playing time, and again, we always say this at every position, if you come in and work and you make your mark, you're going to have the shot to play early regardless of the stature of the guys on the depth chart ahead of you. That's just the way things go. But I mean, pass catching tight ends like Fogel have succeeded at Penn State in the past, directly under Howe's watch. That's what Fogel is. He's an uberly athletic kid. Basketball background. Reminds me a little bit of a previous target from a couple cycles back, Caleb Odom, who's a transition into a college wide receiver, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. But Fogel, I think he's going to stick at tight end. He's a really, really impactful pass catcher. A kid Penn State would love to add in this class, but they're going to have to make up ground this weekend. Georgia's done well. LSU's done well. Those two are the teams to beat right now, so Penn State's playing a little bit from behind.
So the SEC calling for the Ohio tight end out of Lexington High School, 6'3", 225. And as Tyler said, a top 10 tight end and a guy who also drew interest at the college level playing basketball. So a lot to work with there. If you're a tight ends coach, Ty Howell will get his chance to go face-to-face this weekend. Let's go over to the offensive line. A couple key names. One is a very long-term target that we've brought up a bunch on this podcast. The other is a guy that we saw earn his offer last Friday on the camp field for Penn State. And both of them will be in town. And this is an offensive line class that when you factor in how things appear to be trending with Marlon Brightite out of New Jersey, again, back on campus last week, he's made an official visit. Penn State certainly seems to be the ultimate destination, barring a change as he works his way toward a commitment. And so where are we with the offensive line recruiting with these two players coming to campus, and who are they?
Yeah, bringing in a pair of top targets. Well, one's, like you said, been an established target. The other, a rising target. The established target is Emmanuel Ihenacho, one of the top offensive linemen in the nation. 5-star recruit, number 22 overall in our rankings, number 2 on the interior. Play tackle as well. I mean, goes without saying, Penn State loves this kid. They've loved Emmanuel Ihenacho from the jump. I think every program in the nation could probably say that. He's been one of the most impressive prospects I've ever seen on the camp circuit when I saw him at Under Armour Baltimore last spring. I think that's saying a lot about his upside and potential. Look, a couple years ago, maybe Penn State has one like this done. I mean, it has a lot going for it, but we're in a different era now with NIL, rev share, stuff like that. So programs like Oregon have been heavily involved, LSU, Auburn. Those have been Ihenacho's 3 official visits to date. I still think the Nittany Lions would need a couple bounces in their direction, some breaks for this one to end with Ihenacho landing in State College when it's all said and done. Now, this is the chance to make the push, right? If you could really get things over the top and turn the tide in your direction, the official visit is the time. It's the first time Ihenacho's parents are going to be joining him in Happy Valley. I think that's notable. The official visits are the trips they have been joining him on. That wasn't always the case due to the nature of their jobs. They weren't able to make some of the unofficial visits. We're not able to make any of Ihenacho's unofficial visits to Penn State, but now the officials rolled around. They made sure they could take all these OVs with them, so they're going to be in town for some valuable FaceTime with the staff. We'll see where things go. If you're a Penn State fan, I wouldn't necessarily be holding my breath on this one in the end, but hey, look, the potential for a move is there, and Penn State's going to take its best shot.
Tyler, before we get to the new guy, before we get to the new name, let's focus in here because people have been pretty fixated on Ihenacho and his placement on the offensive line board. And there's been times when it seemed like Penn State was really trending away, and maybe he was trending towards staying home even with Maryland, and that has changed, and there's been a lot of ebbs and flows here. Yeah. When you look at the possibility of, I'm just imagining Phil Troutwine welcoming Ihenacho and Kevin Brown into his room within the same class and what that might mean for the future for the Nittany Lions. But if Penn State were to make up some ground, perhaps be the team that edges out the rest of the pack, signs him in December, what do you think would be the differentiating factor? Because NIL has been a big part of this conversation too. And so if they are to get him on board and he's a member of this team next year, why did it happen based on the intel and the data that you have here in June?
I think proximity to home would probably be the tipping point. A lot of these other programs, LSU, Oregon, Auburn, they're just not as close to home as Penn State is. They're not that regional option. And I know Maryland thought that's what it had going for it, not just recruitment, but let's just call a spade a spade. Those two programs are in different places when it comes to national notoriety and where they're at when it comes to potential success. That's something Ihenacho obviously has an eye on as well. He wants to win at the next level. Penn State's, they're competing for national titles, and that carries appeal. But I think proximity to home, if the parents don't want to travel across the country to a place like Oregon, if they don't want to head down south to LSU or Auburn to watch him play, I think Penn State stands as a pretty attractive option at that point. And what we've said with NIL and rev sharing in general, Penn State has the potential to be, competitive and aggressive where they need to be. Ihenacho is the kind of talent that warrant that kind of attention. But if there is a tipping point, I think it would be proximity at home.
Ihenacho considered the number 22 overall recruit in our rankings at 24/7 Sports. He is a 5-star prospect out of Georgetown Prep School in Baltimore, Maryland. And when we get to this next name, again, this is a guy that we're kind of playing catch up with generally. Some guys have been on Penn State's target board for years, others for days. And that's the case with the other offensive lineman making his trip for this official visit.
Yeah, Charlie Tholin of Avon Old Farms in Connecticut, a program Penn State's plenty familiar with on the recruiting trail. Just got Owen Alicine from that program this past cycle, and things have moved really quickly here. He gets his offer last Friday, and now this Friday he's going to be on campus for an official visit. It was originally looking like he was going to visit next weekend, bump things up following a workout at Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish didn't offer. I bring that up because this recruitment has had the feeling of one where if Notre Dame were to jump in, it could have very well ended in that direction because Thom has family ties to the program. I believe his mother is an alum, so there's that. But Notre Dame has yet to make a move. Penn State is indeed making its move. They want Thom in this class. He's firmly on commit watch for me this weekend, I think Penn State has a really good chance to get this one across the line when it's all said and done. Right now, no other OVs on the schedule, and arguably the most notable point, he told me no other camps on the schedule for this summer. So he's done working out and getting around for offers. Seems pretty solid where he's at, and I think Penn State's pacing the pack right now.
We saw him sharing that primary group of offensive linemen who were under the direct supervision of Phil Trautwein, and for a considerable period of time, both Andy Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator, and the head coach, James Franklin. It was him, it was Kevin Brown, it was Roseby Lubintis. Those two are already committed. It was Marlon Bright, who, again, everything seems to point toward him ending up in this Penn State class. And you had our notebook up last Friday coming off of that camp event. I know you've probably had a chance to pick some minds in Lash as well about this offer. What was it that he was able to accomplish? Because he's got a unique, not all that unique in New England, but unique to this cycle for Penn State, where he's a reclassified kid. He's undergoing a position transition from a tight end. And this isn't all that unique for Phil Trautwein to recruit those types of players. But again, we're playing catch up. Help us do our homework on this one.
Yeah, converted tight end. He's yet to play tackle at the prep level, actually, because, again, he's a reclassified kid. As you said, when the athleticism stands out, I believe he runs the 40 in like the 5-second range, which is kind of ridiculous at his 6'6", 275 size. And that's legit size as well. That size checked out while he was on campus. He's so agile. I think we saw that during drill work last weekend. He still needs to get stronger, no doubt about that. But, again, we're talking about a kid who's coming off playing tight end. That's to be expected. He's got to get stronger in the upper half. That's going to come over time. So Penn State sees a lot of upside and a lot to tap into. That's a huge part of the appeal. And then, again, the athleticism. We talk about that with every Penn State offensive line take. You got to be able to move. Fzone can definitely move.
All right, defensive line is where we're going to finish this conversation for the upcoming official visitors. There's a lot more previewing this weekend over at Lions247.com from Tyler. But when it comes to the defensive line, Dion Barnes had a hell of a weekend last weekend. No commitments coming off it just yet, but you broke it down quite well in our first episode this week about all the guys that were on campus from the defensive line perspective. Who has your attention now going into this weekend?
Carter Gooden. All right. So this is a very interesting recruitment, man. This is probably one of the more interesting recruitments down the stretch because it's been such a whirlwind in the last couple of weeks. Penn State originally had an official visit locked in. Visit got scrapped because there was kind of discrepancy in fit. Gooden wants to play on the edge at the next level. Penn State was previously recruiting him to play on the inside. Penn State wound up deciding, hey, look, we could see him as an edge as well. So let's, circle back, see if we can get that OV kind of back on the schedule. And it happened. He's going to be on campus this upcoming weekend. And for anyone hearing that and being like, oh, they're just saying what he wants to hear. He could be an edge rusher at the next level. And then the second he gets to State College, they're just going to move him inside. We've seen it play out with Liam Andrews. That's really not how this staff operates, not how this staff rolls. Or going back to Andrews' recruitment, he was previously a top offensive line target, got the chance to play on the D-line, and once Penn State found out that was his positional preference, they rolled with it. And he's gotten every opportunity to stick there. Gooden's going to get every opportunity to stick on the edge if Penn State is his school of choice. I think the Nittany Lions have a pretty good chance here. I don't want to discount Boston College. I think they've done some pretty good work with Gooden. He's been very, very active on the official front. He's already had trips to Arizona State, UCLA, Rutgers, Michigan State. He's been out and about on the OV trail, man. Penn State gets him this weekend. It's a pivotal visit for him. That's another program where Penn State's in pretty good. Got a good relationship with the staff of that Massachusetts prep program. So a lot working in favor of Penn State. But again, he's got Boston College next weekend. I think the Eagles, I think they might have a chance to close that one out next weekend, depending on how things play out. But Penn State's right in the thick of that race.
Yeah, you talked about their relationship with the staff. That's going to continue to develop up there at Tabor Academy because 2027 quarterback Peter Bork, a top 10 quarterback nationally, a top 100 recruit at 24/7 Sports. He is certainly on that target board for Penn State, looking toward that 2027 cycle with QBs. Just going back to Gooden real quickly, because I am curious to see what the close looks like for Dion Barnes with this recruiting class on the defensive line. I think I've mentioned this a few times over at Lions247.com, but believe they have like 13 players on the 2025 roster who have freshman eligibility. That includes 7 true freshmen. That's going to include Daniel Jennings, who we thought was originally going to be in the 26 class as a top-end edge rusher. Now he's going to be a Nittany Lions freshman this season. So they've got Isaac Chukwura, who's a defensive end, making that transition toward the interior. They've got Alex Haskell, who's played a lot of defensive end for St. Joe's Prep in Philly, got reps both inside and outside at camp last week, but seemingly trending towards more of an interior role perhaps at the next level. And then you've got Carter Gooden, where it's a conversation. Maybe it's a bit of a debate between the staffs that are recruiting him. Maybe it's an internal debate for Gooden himself as he tries to figure out where his fit is on the field. How bigger could this class get, and how much is there an emphasis on adding truly defined edge rushers who you're not wondering if they're going to be defensive tackles? You know they're going to have speed. You know they're going to maybe fit your prototype for what a guy needs to accomplish on the perimeter.
Yeah, there's definitely a coveted skill set coming off the edge. I think you look at guys like Carter Meadows, Tyson Harley, Jackson Ford, Luke Wafel. They kind of fit that prototype of what Penn State truly wants at the position. Gooden falls under that realm as well. But again, there are going to be some things in his physical development that he just can't control. That's the way it works. So we're going to have to see where he grows, if he continues to grow. If he can redo his body as well. That's another thing that we always talk about with these defensive linemen. Some guys, they get to college at their current frame and they do some work on their frame and they recomp and they wind up sticking as a defensive end because they really traded in fat for muscle and they just stuck at that weight and maintain that quick first step that makes them an impactful edge rusher. Some guys, obviously, they go in a different direction. They grow into defensive tackles. But when it comes to edge rusher, like the guys I mentioned, those are the coveted skill sets. Penn State could add 3, maybe 4 edges in this class, depending on how things play out. I mean, Daniel Jennings reclassifying really changed the math, opened things up a little bit more for Dion Barnes. On the interior, they like to add one more. Ideally, a guy like Damar Simeon, he is a top target for Dion Barnes. Keyshawn Stansel's another top target, really a priority for the staff, but I think that one's headed more down south. Garrett Witherington was on campus last weekend. He has a spot in the class if he wants it, but he's still taking official visits. And then another name, a new name that we haven't really talked about a whole lot because he was a late offer, was Teron Richardson from Virginia. He's on the official visit slate for this weekend now as of last night. So a lot of moving parts still on the D-line. Barnes last weekend was busy. He's going to remain a busy man this weekend as well.
The next commitment for Penn State will be their 20th in the 2026 cycle. We've heard from Tyler. 30 could be a number you see Penn State approach as things move forward in the months ahead. But we are anticipating as we get into the second half of this official visit window, followed by decision time for a lot of players at the tail end of June and the start of July, the complexion of this class will change once again. We'll be on it over at Lions247.com every step of the way. And we'll be back on the Penn State practice fields Friday. We're going to see the Big Man Challenge Part 2 this summer. Get to see, hopefully, Kevin Brown, because we know Harrisburg squad is coming down for 7-on-7 tournament action. There's going to be a bunch of teams present. We're going to have highlights, updates over at Lions247.com throughout Friday. There's no Sunday camp this time around. They're going to let the coaching staff and some of us reporters enjoy a little Father's Day action on Sunday, so we won't be back on the field. But, Tyler, tell the folks what they need to know. Before you dive into all your official visit coverage, you're not a dad yet, so you're going to be doing a little bit of that on Sunday. Make sure you say hi to your dad. But I know you'll be pretty busy on Sunday getting feedback out of official visits. But tomorrow – we're recording on a Thursday, by the way. Tomorrow, Friday, is going to be a nice opportunity to get more in-person evaluation. What are you looking for most, and what are you expecting to provide coverage-wise at Lions247.com going into the weekend?
Well, it's a better and deeper tournament, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. I mean, last weekend, really, the offensive lineman and the Big Man Challenge was the star of the show. 7-on-7, it wasn't, let's just call it what it was. It really wasn't all that entertaining. There were some entertaining matches. Beyond that, this weekend's talent pool is much, much deeper, and it's going to be a much, much higher level of competition. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a good tournament. We're going to have plenty to cover coming out of that. 7-on-7, it's another eval opportunity for the staff. We've seen offers go out. I mean, look no further than Jasir Rogers. He earned his offer from Penn State after impressing the staff during 7-on-7 last year. So it's not just a fun little thing that we go to cover. There's legit juice that comes from the evaluation standpoint, from a recruiting intel standpoint. There's always a lot to take away from the 7-on-7 on Big Man Camp. So not just OV coverage on our end. We got 7-on-7 coming for you all weekend.
All right, Tyler, I know you got an early car ride to get our way. We'll see you on the field, and spend a few hours together out there. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. Always a good time.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast. Big thanks, as always, to Lions 24/7 recruiting insider Tyler Calvaruso. Before him, you heard from quarterback trainer Brad Maendler, who is working with current and future Penn State quarterbacks. Really unique perspective from Brad. Big thanks to him for hopping on, talking about some passers with us. Again, a big weekend of coverage coming your way at Lions247.com from more camp action, from more official visits. 50% off. That 60% deal I mentioned last week, that's over. The good news is we got a 50% deal that just popped up because 24/7 Sports wants you to get a great opportunity to see how we cover Penn State football, how we cover Penn State football recruiting, and this is a great time of year to do that. Head over to the site, check it out. If you're already on board as a VIP subscriber, we thank you so much. You are how we keep running this podcast, our coverage at the site. In the meantime, I'm Tyler Donahue. We'll talk to you real soon right here on the Lions 24/7 podcast.